Okay, we're live.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a regular council meeting for Monday, March the 22nd. Call the meeting to order at 6:31. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest from any member of council? No. Okay. All right. Can I get a motion then to adopt the minutes of our March 8th council meeting, moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Hall? Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Okay. Public question period. Were there any questions submitted?
No questions this evening, Your Worship.
Okay. So we have two presentations this evening. The first is a proclamation for World Autism Day, Autism Awareness Day rather, which is not until April the 2nd, but we don't have another regularly scheduled meeting between now and then. So I will deliver the proclamation tonight, and it reads as follows. Whereas autism is a pervasive developmental disorder affecting the social, communication, and behavioral skills of those affected by it, and whereas more health professionals are becoming proficient in diagnosing autism, more children are being diagnosed on the autism spectrum, resulting in rates as high as 1 in 68 children nationally. And whereas while there is no known cure for autism, it is well documented that if individuals with autism receive early and intensive treatment throughout their lives, they lead significantly improved lives. And whereas individuals with autism often require a lifetime of specialized and community support services to ensure their health and safety and to support families' resilience as they manage the psychological and financial burdens autism can present, now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of the Council of the Town of Shelburne, do hereby proclaim April 2nd, 2021 as Autism Awareness Day in the Town of Shelburne, and urge all residents to participate in autism awareness activities in order to become better educated about autism and create a better community for individuals with autism. So I think we'll be the plan to raise the autism flag as well. So that will take place the first part of April. All right, so the second presentation is Bobby Ferguson on behalf of the Rotary Club of Shelburne to talk about the Heritage Music Festival. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As you are probably all aware, the Heritage Music Festival has once again been postponed till 2022. Hopefully we can have it then. And the Rotary Club, being a fundraising organization, still needs to find events to raise money for our many causes. So we were granted money for this year's Heritage Music Festival by the town, and we're holding two events. The letter that I sent, it was one event in June, but now it's two events, one in May and one in August. And we're hoping that we can reallocate the money granted for the Heritage Music Festival to support these two events. So I can tell you a bit about the one in August. It is Lisa Way doing Rhinestone Cowgirl. So it's a Dolly Parton, or Songs of Dolly Parton, and it'll be a drive-in event at the Fiddle Park. And the one in May, it could either be a musical event or a movie night. So we had a little bit of a glitch with that one. So, but we're still going to hold an event that day, and it'll be a fundraiser for the Splash Pad. And the event in August will support our other events, mostly in support of food stability in Shelburne.
Okay.
So that's what we're looking at, is two events rather than a 4 or 5 day event of Heritage Music Festival.
Okay. Just a question for our treasurer. Could you just refresh my memory? How much money did we allocate for Heritage Music Festival?
$5,000.
1,000?
Five.
Okay. So Bobby, you'd be looking for the full 5,000 just to use for those other two events?
For the other two events, yes.
All right.
If I could.
Thoughts from council? Councilor Bernardo?
think it's a good thing, and it'll help raise the spirits of the town. I mean, with COVID going on and people being sort of unable to get out and go to movies or to enjoy music, I think it's a fantastic thing. I support it fully.
Do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I'll motion that all $5,000 that was the town's donation to the Heritage Festival be given to the Rotary Club to conduct 2 events, one in May and one in August. And that hopefully they have profitable events.
Okay. We have a seconder for that motion, Councillor Wagner. All right. Any discussion or debate on the motion? All in favor? All right, that's carried.
Thank you very much.
Well, good luck, and let us know if we can help in any other way.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be talking. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bobby.
Thank you.
All right, so it was pointed out in my rush to get to the Autism Awareness Day proclamation, I skipped right over our national anthem and our land acknowledgement. My apologies. What I would suggest with the indulgence of council, we have one more deputation, so I would suggest that we allow those folks to make the presentation, and then before we get into the regular portion of our agenda, we'll break for a few minutes to do the national anthem and the land acknowledgement. Sound fair? Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, so our deputation tonight is from Katarzyna Sliwa from Dentons Canada and Nick Karakis from the IBI Group. And they are joining us this evening on behalf of Flato Developments to discuss the sewage capacity allocation report that comes a little later in the agenda. So Katarzyna, Nick, Emma looks like with us as well. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to get us started tonight.
Sure. Yep. No, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Council. My name is Katarzyna Sliwa. I am a municipal planning lawyer for Flato Developments. As you know, Flato is the owner of approximately 38 hectares of land in the west side of the town of Shelburne, immediately adjacent to the western boundary of the existing town settlement area. As you know, as a first phase, Flato intends to develop just over 2 hectares in the southern portion of the lands for seniors apartments, being market rent, purpose-built rental designated or designed for seniors, and a commercial development. The first phase can be serviced in the current rated capacity of the sewage treatment plant, and you'll hear from Flato's engineer, Nick Karakis, on that more shortly. There is available capacity for the equivalent of 75 residential units and 0.57 hectares of commercial development. And we respectfully request that Flato be allocated the existing capacity for the seniors apartment building and the commercial plaza. You are receiving an update from the town planner today as well under item P 2021-07 of the agenda regarding the Flato applications. As a further update to that update, on Friday, March 19th, so this past Friday, Flato submitted the official plan applications to Dufferin County and the town of Shelburne in support of the development under the growth plan policies that would permit for modifications to the urban boundary in advance of the municipal comprehensive review in order to expedite the seniors housing component. The package also included a zoning bylaw amendment application and a draft plan of subdivision application. Ms. Emma West, as Mr. Mayor already pointed out, of Bousfields is also with us today in the event that council has any questions or planning related questions for her. As I said, Mr. Karakis will speak to the available capacity, but I did want to note that the sewage capacity report you are receiving under item DO 2021-02 of the agenda doesn't appear to consider stage 4 areas outside of Flato's phase 1 development. These lands are included in all the future growth areas in the town boundary for the purposes of the Class EA and should be included in any considerations for the purposes of the report In particular, in discussing the costs associated with the servicing upgrades, all of the future growth areas are factored into that cost. So the anticipated 26 to 33 $1 million would be distributed among all of the development or units encompassed by the lands, including the lands within the stage 4 area. In previous reports that we've seen from Esberton and Associates to council, the schedules did show the stage 4 areas, but this report doesn't seem to have similar schedules unless I've missed something. The stage 4 area should be added to Appendix 2 of this report as well. I would respectfully submit. Lastly, and as you know, Flato and its consultants have been monitoring and participating in the county's municipal comprehensive review. Flato has been working with the county and the town to have the Flato lands included in the settlement area boundary. We continue to request that the county include the lands in the town of Shelburne settlement area boundary through that MCR process. Again, we respectfully ask and request that Flato be allocated the existing capacity for the seniors apartment building and commercial plaza. I'd like to turn it over now to Mr. Karakis, but will remain on the line in the event that there are any questions for me. Thank you for allowing us to make this deputation tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of council. My name is Nick Karakis and I'm with the IBI Group. On behalf of the Flato team, IBI Group is acting as civil engineers for the Flato lands in the town of Shelburne, and I'm the civil project manager. The Flato team continues to have an interest in the progress of the wastewater pollution control plant, environmental assessment, along with the ongoing flow monitoring and sewage capacity allocation of the current treatment plant. In support of the Flato Phase 1 development that includes a seniors residence with 93 residential units and a supporting commercial block with 0.18 hectares of gross flow area, there is nominal wastewater flow to be, wastewater flow proposed to be generated. Given the need and benefit for seniors housing in the town of Shelburne, the Flato team would like to continue to work with the town to advance this Phase 1 development. The staff report dated March 22nd, 2001 on sewage allocation capacity identifies the remaining unallocated residential capacity to be the equivalent of 75 residential units, which is based on a blend of unit types such as single and semi-detached homes, townhomes, and apartments. The report provides assumptions on the persons per unit for the different housing types, and the average household size is 3.38 persons per unit. Applying this average household size to the 75 residential units results in a population of 254 persons. Since the seniors' residence will be apartments, the average household size of 1.57 people per unit for apartments needs to be used instead of the average household size of 3.38 people per unit. This will result in more than 75 unallocated residential units that can be accommodated. An average household size of 1.57 people per unit equates to a population of only 146 persons for the seniors' residence. Given the need for seniors housing in the town of Shelburne, and that the total wastewater flow from this development is negligible in compared to the overall capacity of the treatment plant, as heard by Ms. Sliva, we respectfully ask for the capacity to be included in Phase 1. The sewage capacity allocation report identifies remaining unallocated capacity for also ICI, industrial, commercial, and institutional lands to be 0.57 hectares of gross floor area. Given that the other unallocated ICI developments within the town mostly each require greater than 0.57 hectares of gross floor area, Flato's Phase 1 only requires 0.18 hectares of gross floor area and is therefore an ideal candidate for unallocated remaining capacity in the treatment plant due to the negligible proposed flow to be generated, and even more specifically, to complement the much needed seniors residence. To ultimately service all future phases of the Flato development, the report indicates that upgrades to the wastewater pollution control plant must be completed. To assist with the financial requirements needed to upgrade the plant, Flato is prepared to have discussions with the town of Shelburne to upfront their share of future development charges. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this delegation. If there are any questions, Ms. Sliva, Ms. West, and myself are available to address them. Thank you.
Okay, questions from council? Councilor Bernardo?
I guess I had a question for Nick. Where are you with the MTO in regards to entrance for the senior building?
We have had discussions with MTO. In principle, they are on board. The MTO is expecting to have a HAMP study completed, which my understanding is the town has initiated that study or is in the early stages of initiating that study.
Okay, and a question for Ms. Silva. So you said you put the application in on Friday for the seniors building?
Yes, that is correct, Councilor Bernardo, through you, Mr. Mayor and Chair.
So, okay. So I guess only other question I have for Nick again. You're calculating 1.75 people per unit in the seniors building?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Mr. Bernardo, it is 1.57 people per unit, and that is the assumption that was made in the sewage allocation capacity report.
Okay, and how much, sorry, how much support are you getting from Dufferin County?
I'm sorry?
How much support, like, where is Dufferin County? How much support are you getting from Dufferin County? Like, where are they at? Are they supporting the application? Are they sitting there saying, no, we're not going to process it and go ahead? Like, how much support, like in your discussions with them?
Councilor Bernardo, if I could clarify, perhaps we did have a pre-consultation meeting with Dufferin County planning staff, and the application that I referred to having been submitted on Friday, there is an official plan amendment application that went into Dufferin County, as well as the parallel application that is filed with the town, supporting zoning bylaw amendment application and the draft plan of subdivision. And further clarification, I should say that all of those applications were filed by Bousfields, by Ms. West's office, and not myself. In the event you're looking for that submission, it wouldn't be from my office.
Okay. Thank you. That was it.
Okay. Any other questions at this stage? I mean, we do have the report from our contract engineer a little bit later in the agenda, so I suspect there may be more discussion and questions after that. Not seeing anything else at this point. Okay, so if not, can I get a motion to receive the delegation? Councillor Fegan. Second by Councillor Bernardo. All right, all in favor? All right.
Mr. Mayor, sir, we're the three of us are happy to stay on the line for
Okay.
the additional items should the council have any questions.
That's good. Appreciate that because that may very well be the case. So, okay.
Thank you.
All right. So before we move to council inquiries, we'll just take a step back, and I would ask everybody to stand for the playing of the national anthem if you're able. All right, and before we move on with the rest of the regular agenda, we would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. Are there any council inquiries for this evening? Councilor Bernardo?
I know I had an inquiry from one of the residents, and I know that she spoke to Jim Moss. Helen Lloyd, who's a senior in the community, is almost blind, and she's quite elderly. And trying to look after her lawn, she uses one of those robo lawn machines, and they have to have wiring in the lawn itself to work properly and to cut the full lawn. I guess during the winter time, when the banks were cut back, for some reason, whoever cut the banks back went over the town portion of her lawn, and the wiring is down about 2 inches within the lawn itself. And they tore up the wiring. I know that I think it was Brad went out this afternoon and tried to fix some of the wiring, but there's no guarantee that whatever was done will actually work until the machine is able to go out and do the cutting of the lawn. It's going to cost her about $300 to fix everything back up and make it proper again and bury the wires properly within the lawn. And while I understand that it is the town's portion, I think it's pretty unfair that we did that to the lawn. And I don't see any reason as to why whoever cut the banks back had to cut into the lawn and disturb the lawn. There's no, in my mind, reason for that. So I'm wondering if we as a council are willing to assist the senior in covering the costs of fixing that lawn back up.
Jim, do you have anything to add on that?
Through your worship, yeah, we if there is damage to a lawn from snow removal, whether it be from the wing of a plow, the blade from plowing sidewalks, or from, in this case, the blower that was cutting back intersections to get sight lines back out there, we do go back out and we do repair the lawns. I did have our public works supervisor go over today to look at the line, see if he could splice it. Normally we have these requests frequently for people to have put infrastructure of their own out in our portion of the road allowance. And we don't allow it for the reason that we don't want to have to come back and try and repair something that normally wouldn't be within our road allowance anyway. I know they did try to fix that. I wasn't able to, didn't have the time to get back to my supervisor this afternoon to see how he made out. I did have a call from him, but I couldn't take it at the time. So I'll have to see how he made out there.
Well, sorry, Denise, go ahead.
Sorry, just to build on what Jim said, I think it's to allow us to address the particulars of this situation, we need more time to review it. As the director said, it's really important that there aren't encroachments or infrastructure of any sort installed on public property for these exact reasons. So we would appreciate if council would let us have time to review this and provide you with more background, because similar to anything that's on public property, there's usually a reason why it's required that you don't utilize those spaces. And obviously snow maintenance and snow removal is a challenging situation to begin with. And we do rely on having our access to our own property for those reasons, but we do reinstate when we damage your property on your property. So
Okay.
if we could get back to you, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I was actually going to suggest that if Brad was out there today and has attempted a fix, I mean, we're certainly not at the point, despite the nice weather today, where we're going to be cutting grass in the next week or two. So I don't have a problem in leaving it till the next meeting and let's see what what comes of it. And hopefully, if Brad was able to splice the wires, then problem solved, and we can carry on. But if not, we can bring that up again. Does that sound fair, Councilor Bernardo?
Yeah, I'll speak to Helen. I mean, she's pretty understanding and understands and realizes it. And the only reason I even brought this up tonight is because this is a particular different situation. I mean, if it was someone like myself or that's able to cut lawn or look after things, but in her particular case, it's a little different than the norm. And you know, I'm sure investigate it. Hopefully that it is fixed, but if not, then I'm hoping council and good spirit will assist the senior.
All right. Any other inquiries? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Mayor Mills, just to inquire about the status of the Arts and Culture Committee. I know that at some point that was put out and we probably didn't get the response that we were looking for. So I was just wondering, and maybe Jennifer, you could speak to this as to where we are regarding that, please.
Yes, certainly, through your worship. I did put out a call pre-COVID for applications for the committee. I did not receive, I'm going to guess, I think I got about 3 or 4, not enough to form a full committee. We need at least 5 members to form a committee. I had intentions of re-advertising. COVID has hit, and I just haven't had a chance to reinstate that, but definitely do have that on my radar as a next step item.
Why don't I make this suggestion? Because Councillor Buffett and I had sort of talked a little bit about this, again, pre-COVID. But if she and I and Deputy Mayor Anderson and perhaps the clerk just schedule a quick Zoom meeting, we can maybe look at the 2 or 3 applicants that we did receive. And I think, you know, building on that, there may be some others who we know of who have expressed interest outside of, you know, formal ads and everything else. But at least to give us a bit of a bulwark to get started with. And then we can, you know, put out another ad for public applications again. Does that work? Okay. All right. So if you could just send out maybe an invite sometime this week, the 4 of us could put our heads together. Okay.
Will do.
Okay. Anything else before we move on? No? Okay. All right. So the first item under motions and bylaw for discussion is report DO 2021-01 from the Director of Development and Operations regarding the Aqua Water Summary and Annual Reports. So, Jim, do you want to take us through this one?
Sure. Through your worship, Ontario Regulation 17003 requires that our Schedule 22 reports be prepared and received by council by March 31st of each year. Last year, due to COVID, we were able to receive those with an email confirmation, but the ministry does like if you have a council resolution with that. The annual reports, they must be prepared and submitted by February 28th of the following year to meet requirements under Section 18 of Reg 17003. For years now, the Ontario Clean Water Agency has been the town's operating authority with the town of Shelburne in a supporting role there with distribution. This report covers from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, and fulfills the requirements for reporting under Schedule 22 of Reg 170. The requirements of these reports are as follows. They must contain quantities and flow rates of water supplied during the year, including monthly averages, maximum daily flows, and there is a comparison of these to make sure that they match with our environmental compliance approvals, our permit to take water, as well as our drinking water works permits to ensure that we're in compliance with all associated regulations. Copies of these summary reports and annual reports must also be available to the public free of charge. And we do post them on our website for the public, as well as have copies at the office available to them as well at Town Hall. Appendix 1 is the summary reports. Appendix 2 are the annual reports, and they were submitted by Aqua to the town on February 26th, 2021. Apologies, that says 2020. Our annual inspection this year with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks was conducted September 15th, 2020. And the town received a final inspection report on November 24th of 96.77%. So this keeps us in compliance with our regulation 170.03. Our consultations were with Ontario Clean Water Agency, as they have to produce the reports. With council's strategic priorities, it does meet with target 2 for municipal services review and evaluations. Target 6 to promote more open communication, and target 8 to enhance marketing and education. Appendix 1 again is the summary reports. Appendix 2, the annual reports, and we do have Karen Laurent and I believe Don Irvine from Aqua on hand as well, if there's any questions from council.
Excellent. So Karen, Don, anything else that we should be aware of here? I mean, some of this stuff is pretty technical. 96 plus score is pretty good as far as I'm concerned. But is that an acceptable standard?
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I'm just having some technical difficulties on my end. Yeah, so that's acceptable. It also keeps us compliant with our DWQMS standards that we also follow, which element 21 in the DWQMS is really for continuous improvement. So this was a new inspector, and she was very, very heavy in the regulations. There was a few best practices that she wanted us to just kind of follow up with, which I think everything we had done before she even finished the final print of her report. So yeah, we just move forward, and I don't see any or anticipate any issues with the water system moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, I did notice in the report there were a couple of recommendations, but then there were dates that work had been completed. So nothing else is outstanding as far as you're concerned at this point.
That's correct.
All right. Any questions from council? No. Okay. Can I get a motion to receive that report then? Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. All right. Thanks, guys. Okay, so that takes us to the next report, which is the sewage capacity allocation report. So Jim, are you going to take the lead on this, and then Steve Burnett will?
Yes, through your worship, I can start off, and then Steve Weber and Steve Burnett can follow up for me. So yeah, and in late 2020, council had requested that staff produce a report and come back to council in early 2021 for what we have for sewage capacity allocation left at the sewage treatment plant. Shelburne has had a number of upgrades to our plant over the years since it's been originally built. And we've also undertaken a universal water metering program to promote conversation, as well as an infiltration program to seal up our leaky pipes and stop stormwater and groundwater from entering our sanitary system and unnecessarily taxing our sewage treatment plant. These programs have been effective and resulted in annual sewage flows being maintained at the 2012 level. And this has encouraged our development from that point on with minimal repairs or further expansion of the plant. The town currently has several developments in varying stages of development in process. This report and the accompanying analysis have confirmed that there's not enough sufficient allocation for all the development that's out there for what's being requested. This will not be possible to service without upgrading the sewage treatment plant. So we can't accommodate everybody unless we have those upgrades done. As we mentioned back in a report in September to council, that is between 26 million and 33 million before going out to tenders, but that's our estimates right now. Further reports will be provided in 2021 as we move forward with that process. The wastewater capacity allocation analysis outlined within this report has reports and background from SBA and GSP, and their appendices 1 through 4. The official plan, development staging plan, is provided in Appendix 1, and the related policies guide the allocation of servicing for new development. For Stage 1, reserve servicing capacity is required to allow infill lots and redevelopment in built-up areas. Stage 2 is reserve servicing capacity is required for vacant or underutilized land in built-up areas and mixed-use commercial, employment, and institutional areas. And Stage 3 reserving service capacity is required for areas requiring extension of services. Parts of Stage 3 will require capacity upgrades. And in all areas of allocation, the servicing to specific developments is determined at the time of the development's approval. The tables shown in Appendix 2 from GSP summarize the committed development approvals, planned development based on applications received and in process, and proposed developments. Appendix 3, associated flows is calculated out for our sewage treatment plant and remaining capacities from SBA, from Steve Burnett, as well as Appendix 4 is the background information that explains how we arrived at those numbers. This is basically summarized that we have 540 residential units in approved plans that are currently allocated. Some are under construction, and as expected, these units will be occupied and built in the next 2 to 3 years. 1.53 hectares of gross floor area of institutional, commercial, and industrial, or ICI, is currently approved and allocated. Most of these buildings are under construction and expected to be occupied within the next 1 to 2 years. The remaining capacity unallocated after factoring in services, service commitments for the above development areas is approximated to be about 94 residential units or 2.83 hectares, depending on how you calculate that, as you'll see a little bit later in this. That can change the numbers a wee bit for us. The current demands for residential development include 572 units, of which 312 units are already planned in applications currently in progress. 140 units future development blocks and draft plans of subdivision, and the balance reflects planned potential additional units in the downtown of 93 units proposed on land outside the urban areas, or Stage 4, the Plato properties. Current ICI demands include Fieldgate's commercial site, which the application is in process and is planned in construction for this year. We also have a request in from Blue Mountain Plastics for additional industrial affluent capacity to expand their operations. Those are just in preliminary talks right now. And we have pre-application consultations for additional industrial and institutional developments in other areas down in the industrial parks area. Future residential ICI demands significantly exceed the remaining allocated capacity, depending on increasing the sewage treatment plant. As I mentioned before, those numbers at the top of the page, if we recalculate that for the unallocated capacity to 80% residential and 20% ICI. This would allow for 75 additional residential units that are unallocated at that plant. Now, typically, people that are in stage 1, 2, and 3 that are still vying for that would be first in line for those capacities. It's estimated that these demands exceed the remaining allocated capacity by approximately 500 residential units for what we have in the hopper already and what people are looking for or requesting. Our consultations are with Steve Burnett Associates, GSP Group, and this does meet with our strategic priorities. Target 2 for municipal services review evaluation. T3, target 3 for investment in critical infrastructure, and target 6 to promote more open communication, target 7 to promote partnerships and collaboration, and target 8 to enhance marketing and education. So at this time, I think I would turn it over to Steve Weber at GSP to run us through Appendix 1 and 2, and then we can get Steve Burnett to explain Appendix 3 and 4 in greater details.
Thank you, Jim. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Mayor?
No.
No. Are you not hearing me?
Louder.
I can. It's
Okay.
quiet,
Is this
but-
any better?
Yeah.
Or I guess I have to sit really close to my mic. So I just wanted to put on screen some information that's appended to Jim's report there. So give me a moment while I share the map. Just let me know when that appears.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so you'll see in the appendix to Jim's report, this staging of development plan. This is right out of the official plan. And there's just a couple of key points that I want to highlight, and Jim kind of covered them already. What your official plan does is it provides direction for exactly the situation that the town is in right now. So direction of how to allocate and reserve servicing capacity when there's more expectations or more demands for capacity than there is capacity remaining. So what we have right now very clearly is a lot more demand than remaining capacity. And we've known for some time that we were going to reach that point because, as you've seen in previous updates, there's been obviously some planning work undertaken by SBA Engineering to work on the wastewater plant upgrades and the environmental assessment for that. So the plan, for many years now has been to service as much of the stage 1, 2, and 3 area as possible within the rated capacity of the current wastewater plant. Most of stage 1 is already built out. There's not a lot of additional development proposed in that area, but there is some infill and intensification and existing ICI users that are seeking additional capacity. Stage 2 is more in progress. So, the Highland Village development, and I'll put up some maps that show additional, allocated and proposed developments in the stage 2 area. And then stage 3, of course, we have the Fieldgate proposal as the draft plan, primarily as the main development in stage 3. The areas outside of the urban boundary on the west side, so along the west side of Victoria Street in the southwest quadrant, and along the west side of town on the north side of Main Street out to 4th Line. Those two areas are outside the urban boundary and have always been identified as, subject to the wastewater plant upgrades. I think that was generally known going all the way back to when those lands were annexed about 20 years ago, that, servicing those areas was going to require upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant in order to have enough capacity for those areas to develop. So you've seen this map before, but this is an update to it. This just highlights all of the development areas that have been allocated. So these are developments that already have been approved and are under construction or are nearing, the construction stage. Highland Village, the residential portion of Fieldgate, 600 Main Street East, the various infill lots and severances that have been approved in the existing built up area. the Stone Ridge development, the 33 townhouses referred to as Shelburne Towns, a number of ICI developments. So there's the new plaza with the new Tim Hortons in the north end, which is under construction. The Turnstone development has applied for the next phase as well. So the industrial mall and the industrial park, the water bottling facility that Ice River Springs is constructing, a couple of storage uses under construction, and then the Blue Mountain Plastics expansion, which got site plan approval last October. So you can see there's quite a bit of development already committed and approved. So we have to make sure that servicing is maintained for those developments because they have the necessary approvals to move forward.
So, sorry,
yeah.
Steve, I hate to interrupt. I just want to make sure I'm sort of clear as I'm following through the sequence here. So
yeah.
In Jim's report, there was reference to 540 residential units as well as 1.93 hectares of ICI.
Yeah.
That's referring to this, right?
That's this, yeah. Okay. So these are the allocated or committed developments that council has already approved.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the next slide shows that there's a lot more in the application stage or the proposal stage. And, I could go through all of these, but, council's probably aware of most of them. Some of them, you've had some presentations and information such as the Fieldgate commercial development. We do expect to bring forward a report in the next month or two with a site plan approval recommendation on that. They're just tidying up some final changes on the drawings. And they have a fairly large commercial development that's in stage 2 that's ready to go. We do have some development applications over on the west side as well for additional residential. And we also have noted the recent application on Friday by Flato. So the 93 units out here in the stage 4 expansion area, as well as the smaller commercial development. So this is the difficulty. So we have, after you take out all these developments from the remaining capacity, these are committed. What you have left is 79 cubic meters per day of capacity. And Steve will get into more on how he came up with that number. We have demands from all these proposed developments, the Flato ones included, and all these other ones that are nearing approvals of over 750, so almost 760 cubic meters per day. So that's a major shortfall. We knew that the day would come when we would obviously have more pressure than the capacity of the plant can accommodate. But this just highlights the need to really move forward with the wastewater plant expansion because we are far apart between what's remaining and what the demands are for all these developments. So this is the second table attached to Jim's report where you can see there's 572 residential units in process or proposed, and there's some of this ICI demand relates to, for example, some vacant land in the industrial park where there's no applications in process, but the land does have servicing, and there has been an idea to try and maintain some servicing there. So if something does come forward, it's available for an industrial user.
Sorry, Steve. I think I just saw Councillor Buffett's hand up. I'm not seeing everybody on the screen, so I apologize.
Okay.
So can I ask the question?
Yeah.
Steve? Yeah. So my question is, just to give you an example, last council meeting, we had the application on Main Street, I think 600 Main Street. And the recommendation was to defer it for a year, and we approved deferring it. And that kind of bothered me afterwards because there are lots of applications, as is obvious here, that are waiting to be approved. And this kind of, I don't know how to explain it. If you look at other municipalities in other areas that have policies specifically in place to either use your allocation assigned or lose it, I really think that this is something that we have to look at. And I have a motion for later on that I want to present relating to that. But I just want your comments on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do have, it basically is a use it or lose it allocation policy. So when somebody gets a development approval, at the same time as that approval is granted, there's servicing allocated. That way it locks things in. So, you know, when they get to final approval and construction, the capacity is there and, you know, they're not going to be stalled at that stage. In our reporting on 600 Main Street, which is referred to here as Ravine's Edge, that's kind of the marketing name of the development. We noted that they had made some progress on getting to final approval and construction. They are planning to start construction this year. They do have 58 units draft plan approved and they have been actively marketing. We had discussion after the last council meeting with the owners of that development, and they've indicated that they have over 200 people registered for those units. So they're planning to build out those 58 units very quickly. They've submitted all their detailed engineering plans and are at the stage of requesting a pre-servicing agreement. So this development, it wasn't deferred, but rather extended. So the draft plan approval was for 3 years. It's now for 1 more year. And within that year, they need to get final approval in order to construct. So we expect that within the next few months, they're going to get that, you know, approval to start the servicing work in that site. They've requested to start servicing and grading work there and some site clearing. So I think you'll see some activity on that site in the near future, but subject to council's consideration of the necessary agreements to allow.
Okay, so just to add to that. So if you're looking at, there are some other projects that we've already had before us, like one in the downtown area that hasn't proceeded so far. They haven't come back to us, and whether or not they will or not, I don't know. But there are things like that that are taking place that are taking up capacity space that somebody else could be using. So that's why I wanted to, once we're done with this, put forward a motion to deal with that matter. So.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. There are, you know, for example, there is a development proposal that council has seen at a public meeting for 44 units on Owen Sound Street in the downtown. And, you know, that application has not had any forward movement for about a year. So, you know, there are some of that in this map. So the development staging plan with all the proposed developments. So they don't have it, those types of developments don't have any servicing allocated to them at this time. They would be allocated when you know, development approvals are granted.
Right. And similar with some of one of the industrial ones, the property's been sold to somebody else now, and I don't think they would, I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I'm sure it's not going to have the same capacity requirements as the previous cannabis plant was going to have.
Yes, yeah, we have had pre-application consultation on a storage use, which you're right, would not have the same. Now that goes into Steve's report and the types of assumptions that are used for various types of industry.
Okay.
I just wanted to round out the presentation on kind of the policy or the planning side of this with a bit of a flow chart, just to illustrate, you know, how do we make these servicing allocation decisions? The most critical point to make is that the decision, according to your official plan, is to be made at the time of development approval. So the request from Flato in the delegation was to allocate servicing for the units and the commercial proposed tonight, but we've only received the application as of Friday. So normally, and according to your official plan policy, it does say servicing is allocated at the time of development approval. And the reason for that is to make sure that there is a checkpoint where if the progress is not made or the development does not proceed the way the council wants or doesn't obtain the necessary agreements or final approval, that you can then take that servicing capacity away and reallocate it. If it's just kind of granted without any conditions or without any development approvals, council doesn't have that same ability to revisit those allocations later. That's been committed, and then you have to wait. Basically, that servicing capacity is taken out of the hopper. It's no longer available for other developments that are ready to go. So the process is you get a development that's proposed. You know, through the review process, we look at, is the land in the current urban area, stages 1, 2, or 3. If it is, then it goes down the path to the right. And if it isn't, you know, the stage 4 expansion area policy is that it requires the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So automatically you get kicked into this part of the process if you're outside of the urban area. And that's, as I say, been the servicing strategy and the policy for many years now. If you do have a development within the urban area, the question is, is it within the remaining reserve capacity? So that's 79 cubic meters that we have left. If it's not, again, you get kicked down to the re-rating, the wastewater upgrades. If it is, then the first test to look at or question to be answered is it within stage 2 and has a reserve been set up for, or stage 1 and has a reserve been set up for that? Again, because that is the area that already has the pipes in the ground. Most people need minimal approvals to build. Sometimes it's a vacant lot. All it needs is a building permit. So those are prioritized from a servicing standpoint. So if you are within that stage 1 area and there's a reserve capacity, somebody wants to do a basement apartment, for example, then yes, and you can get your approval or conditional approval and the servicing's allocated. If you're not in stage 1, then we check, is it in stage 2? Stage 2, again, is the area where servicing is available, but it may require some extension, or it may require a new pumping station. For example, like the Fieldgate development, part of it is in stage 2 and it's being serviced with a new pumping station. Generally, stage 2 captures ICI development. So it does give a bit of priority to commercial, industrial, and institutional development over large residential subdivisions. If it is in stage 2 and there's reserve capacity, again, that would get allocated at the development approval stage. If it's not, then you check it. If it's in stage 3, is there enough capacity after reserving for stage 1 and 2 to service land in stage 3? If there is, again, a conditional approval with the servicing allocated. If there's not, then parts of stage 3 would require upgrades to and re-rating of the plant. So that's the overall hierarchy that we've used and we've set out. I do want to point out that, a number of parties have, made their decisions based on that servicing strategy. So we have to bear in mind that there are a lot of interested parties who could be affected by decisions about allocating servicing in the remaining capacity. As I mentioned, the Fieldgate commercial development is very close to approval and coming forward, and that's been identified in the past as an important development for the town from the commercial side. It has not been allocated yet. So if it were not allocated, or if that remaining allocation was granted elsewhere, that would really affect that development. So the advice that I would be giving to council is that prior to making decisions about reserving or allocating the remaining capacities, to make sure those parties are given an opportunity to approach council and have their status updated and identify their needs from a servicing perspective, as well as their timing for development. So I think at this point, just to round out the presentation, Steve Burnett was going to go through the final analysis, the appendix on the wastewater capacity update.
Just before we jump over, Steve Weaver, I just had one more question, just to clarify the numbers so that I move into Steve Burnett's presentation clear in my own mind. So the two maps that you showed, the second map showed sort of the other allocation, which is sort of in the queue, for lack of a better term. And I'll just deal with the residential side for now. So there were 572 units listed on that second map.
Yeah. Correct.
Does that 572 include the 540?
No.
Okay.
In addition.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's well over 1,000 units allocated and proposed.
Okay, thanks.
So with council's indulgence, I maybe go into the boring engineering side of this presentation, because I think we've probably got some of the answers up front, just so that everyone can see it, and then I can kind of go through a report. I may skip to the last appendix and do appendix 4 first, and then come back to 3 if that's okay with council's permission. As council knows, I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, and it's a similar report that we bring forward. So I will try and skip through the boring parts that remind us how we do this each time, and just highlight on some of the pieces of importance to council. So As a reminder to council, the sewage treatment plant has current capacity of 3,420 cubic meters a day on an average day demand, or a peak rated capacity of 8,921 cubic meters a day. SBA, as I said, has on an annual basis, although we have done it a couple of years, twice a year, but generally on an annual basis, brought forward this allocation report for sewage capacity. And as was stated by my previous colleagues in the presentation, that we were able to additional capacity and really tweak the plant and do things that I don't think anyone thought was possible back in 2012 or 13. But as per the numbers that have been presented, we've really pushed the plant to its limits, and that has kind of been presented. So in table one of the things I do want to highlight and bring to council's attention, and this is something we've talked about for the last few years, water metering did a great thing, really dropped flows as we anticipated by 20 to 30% after that was put in place. As council can probably see, if you look at some of the tables, the flows that we're seeing in 19 and 20 really closely match up with where we were in 2012 to 2014. And that's kind of what you expect after a water metering program, that you get an initial nice drop, and then it starts to rise back up again as folks get used to paying for their water and things like that. Obviously, COVID has also affected us in the analysis this year. And we did see a rise in the 2020 flows as folks are staying home. We did see a corresponding drop in the ICI, or the business side and commercial side of things. So that actually helped balance things out in the long run. We were quite worried that stay-at-home orders might have been more detrimental to the situation, but there was a bit of a balancing as we've seen that happen. One number that I would like to bring to council's attention is the peaking number for 2020 as well. It came to 8,228, which is only a few hundred cubic meters below the 8921 peak, which is the peak for the plant. So it does tend to show both on an average day, which is how the plant is designed and allocated, as well as on a peak capacity that we are really seeing the top end of those flows. If we skip forward, and again, I'm not going to bore council going through every calculation from an engineering perspective. Table 2, we really do look at that ICI versus residential split so that we can try and move forward. That percentage, as I said, did drop this year, and that did offset some of the flows that we were seeing on the residential side. I would probably skip forward to table 4 at this point and just explain that even on a residential perspective, again, if you're looking at the 2012, 13, and 14 per person or per capita flows in that 250 range average is really where we're penciling out in 2012 as well. So those are the numbers that we've carried forward. I think council has seen we actually used 265 as the number in the past, but just trying to do as much as we can do here and see what we can do. We're quite comfortable with the 250, and that has balanced out over the last few years. So we did adjust to utilize that per capita flow to try and maximize what the existing plant can do. The other thing that I probably, and I did bring this up last year as we were discussing items, that as we grow as a community, sewage demands are based on both either a 3-year or a 5-year average for the sewage treatment plant. So if you're not growing very much or you're staying consistent, then those 3-year and 5-year averages are dealing with if it's a wet year, if it's a rainy year, if you see some high flows, some low flows, but really it's balancing it out as we move forward. Given the fact that Shelburne's been under such high demand from a development point of view, and there's been so many homes built in the last few years within Shelburne, we really are seeing a general trend upwards in those flows. And so last year we did recommend moving to the 3-year average. We are maintaining that again this year because it's very apparent that our averages are not keeping on trend with the actual flows. So using a 5-year would be very inappropriate. And we're at the point where we would almost want to consider using the actual year's flow versus the 3-year average, but we have stuck with the 3-year average at this point. But we will have to consider that in future years as we move forward. Again, if we look at table 5, that does show that the actual flow was 2758 for this year. Again, showing that trend continuing to go up as we continue to grow as a community. And the 3-year average, which is the number that we did use in the calculations, is the 2613 as discussed. As we go through this process, we do have to account for homes that are not yet utilizing the full system or mid-year occupancies. So there were approximately 70 homes, most of those within the Highland development that came online between around July and December. We did go another step that we normally would not do as part of this, and we actually looked at the flows from the Highland sewage pumping station for November and December, because all of those homes were occupied by that time. So we did actually prorate it so that we weren't double counting, where normally we would allow that extra contingency factor to go through, but we did go to that extent. We have maintained, as we always have, the existing residential and ICI that are on septic systems by MECP guidelines. You do have to remain and have capacity for if those septic systems fail. It's a fairly small amount in the big scheme of things, but you do have to maintain that based on guidelines and policies. We have maintained our contingency allowance of 150 this year. We did drop that to 75 last year in the hopes of gaining some efficiencies. And it very clearly, with the difference between the 3-year and the annual average, showed that move was not appropriate. So we've gone back to the same number that we have held for about the last 5 or 6 years, being that 150 cubic meters, so that we don't go over, and COVID has potentially played into that as well. As I indicated earlier, we've maintained or sat with a 250 liter per person per day based on what we've seen in the last year, and is the highest on the last 5-year demand. And we are utilizing the 3-year average as indicated. I think at this point, and as I say, the answers have maybe been already brought forward, but just to be clear and to make sure that this stands out for council, this is kind of either using the last page of our report in Appendix 4 or referring to Appendix 3 as well, probably sets it up. So right now, utilizing the 3-year average and the pieces that we have to put in place, either for units that have been brought in or are already built, but we're not actually in the flows. We currently have 550 cubic meters of available capacity. As Steve very clearly pointed out, there is 540 residential units that council has already allocated, are already off the table, and approximately 1.93 hectares of ICI, which takes us down to a cubic flow available capacity of 79 cubic meters per day. Taking into consideration the units or residential units in ICI that is in the queue, or that applications are on the table already, and again, Steve very clearly laid that out in that table and also in that figure. There's an additional 572 residential units and approximately 10.1 hectares of ICI, which basically takes us to a negative 679 cubic meters of capacity. So really this shows clearly that there is not sufficient capacity left in the sewage treatment plant to allocate, to be fair, even to allocate any of stage or all of stage 1, 2, 3, or any additional piece to that. So at this point, it does become paramount that council really looks at each application and how that can go forward. I know Steve had recommended bringing development groups forward to really set where their things at for stage 1, 2, and 3, because those are the ones that are set forward as your main pieces. I do want to clarify a couple items that I think were brought forward in the presentation earlier today, just to clarify some issues that way. It was stated that stage 4 had previously been in the allocation report, and that is not the case. The allocation report has always only considered stage 1, 2, and 3. So while the EAs are being completed, fully inclusive of stage 4, and that is part of the process of the EA, those have never been included in the allocation report, just so that that's clear for council. The only other item that I did want to bring forward is the numbers that were brought forward for the stage 4 expansion area were based on the consultant's submission. So we did include 90 cubic meters for the seniors residents and the commercial block based on information provided by the consultant for that application. Their original numbers seemed somewhat high to us because it would have had a 206 cubic meters a day flow. So we did lower that number to 90 cubic meters a day based on some of the information that was submitted. And then the updated numbers of them using some of those change numbers of 1.57 for apartments based on the allocation did come in on Friday, as was noted in the previous presentation. So we will definitely review those numbers and go through it, but just so council is aware, the average day flow amount that came in at the same time was actually 146 cubic meters a day for that development. So just to be clear, it's not negligible. It can be considered negligible is a word that you can kind of throw around and throw out there, but this is not a negligible development, and it would use up more than what's left in the sewage treatment plant. So I just wanted that clarity to be provided for council. So as he said, I think on the initial stage, I think Jim and Steve really did provide some of the answers here, and there are some tough decisions to be made by council. I think we have tweaked absolutely everything out of the sewage treatment plant. I think when SBA joined the town several years ago, it was under the premises that the sewage treatment plant, which is the same plant that sits there today, was at capacity, and we have done infiltration work. We have closed up pipes. We have tweaked everything possible. We replaced a filter. We have done an enormous amount of work to tweak everything possible out of that sewage treatment plant. And we are now at the stage that I think several years ago we had hit before. And at this point, as Jim said, it will be paramount to move forward with the EA recommendation, which is an upgrade and expansion to the water pollution control plant. So I think I'll leave my presentation at that stage and open the floor to any questions that council or anyone may have.
Okay, who wants to start? Councilor Buffett and Deputy Mayor Henderson.
Who's going first?
You're up.
Oh, sorry. I thought somebody else was. Okay, so my question regarding what you had just presented to us, if we're looking at, for example, the one development proposal on 12401 Sound Street that Steve had talked about that has 44 units, and also look at the industrial one that's not moving forward, would that, if you took those out, would that give you enough or more than enough to cover the Flato seniors development?
I think through you, your worship, and on to Councillor Buffett. At this point, the numbers have been bouncing around so much from the development application, that we would really need to understand what those true numbers are. So I would really recommend that, similar to how your bylaws and your policies are set up, that we review the application, we actually understand what the need is, because like I said, we've seen numbers from 90 to 200 allocations. So for me to throw a dart at a wall and trying to answer that question right now, I just don't think that's appropriate. We definitely have to have that information.
Yeah, so I'm looking for direction as in terms of whether that's possible once it's all looked at. So you answered my question.
Okay. Is that good, Councillor Buffett?
Yeah.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. And I think Councillor Buffett beat me to the punch bowl, but that's fine. I think it goes without saying that we need expansion. And I think, as both Steve pointed out, that, and I'm looking at here at the report, so I apologize for not directly looking at the screen, that we're probably going to get to this point probably sooner than later. And here we are. The thing is, council has identified this particular Flato project as a priority. And basically unanimously in principle agreed that this is a project that should move forward for, I think, very obvious reasons. And as one of the Steves pointed out, certainly as a town, we're left to make difficult decisions. And that's part of what we have to do. When we look at the current ICI demands, the only one that I'm really concerned about personally is the Fieldgate, because I agree with Steve. We don't want that project that we approved in principle that is well underway, and the commercial block that we asked for, that they're probably going to be coming back and then somehow steal allocation away from them and then prevent them from being able to go forward with that. So that makes sense. I guess my question is, when we say in the report, or when it's said in the report that 80% of the remaining allocated, if capacity is allocated 80% and then 20% to ICI, would that potentially cover the demand or the current demand for that commercial block from Fieldgate? So I know, Steve, that you're saying that maybe we should wait, obviously, for them to come back to sort of pinpoint what that will look like. But would that percentage, if we allocated 80 to 20%, would that potentially cover that?
I can start, and then I'm not sure if that was directed to me, Mr.
Sure.
And then Steve Burnett may be able to add. So I'm just trying to find the number here, but when we allocate 20% of the remainder to ICI, I think we got something in the order of 0.5 hectare?
0.57.
0.57. So the Fieldgate plan for their phase 1 commercial development is 0.63. So they actually need more than that, and they need part of the 80% we were saying to earmark for residential. And then they have another block across the road from there that's 0.32 hectares. So once we get into starting to convert those from residential into commercial, you can see the residential number starts to go down, but it would be more like a 50-50 allocation to fully accommodate Fieldgate's commercial plans. And then the other thing I'll point out is that they do have a medium high density / commercial block or mixed use block that's not allocated yet, and they're inquiring about another 75 units on that block. No definition yet on type or built form, but they're in the process of building the services for that block as well, like the sewage treatment, the sanitary pumping station, the forest main, and the underground water main and sanitary sewers. So they do have allocation for 257 units. They're seeking allocation for 0.63 hectare of commercial, like imminently. They have another 0.32 hectare of commercial likely to come in the next little while, and then the 75 units on top of that likely to come before the end of the year in terms of a request for allocation.
Okay. I mean, I think as Councilor Buffett pointed out, and this sort of, I guess, where I was thinking in my mind by way of, allocation that may be out there but there's not a lot of movement on that. And Councilor Buffett pointed out seemingly two opportunities where potentially that could be used to service the Flato project. And so by way of a motion, I know I'm sort of skipping ahead, and I know probably some other individuals have some comments, but by way of a motion, it was contemplating in my mind that staff at some point come back and let us know what the reallocation opportunities are available to us, if that's something that we decide to do. And albeit I understand the process and the guidelines, and as you pointed out, that maybe some people may be making decisions based on the guidelines, but I'd like to know sort of what are these opportunities, inclusive of what Councillor Buffett has stated, just to see whether or not there is a possibility of having that project serviced. But again, I know I'm skipping ahead, so I'll formulate some more thoughts and maybe put that down a little bit more succinctly, but I'll wait for any other questions that come up first. So thank you.
Councilor Donato.
This is a question for Steve Burnett. Steve, if we were to give you the go-ahead tonight to start upgrading the sewage treatment plant, what in your mind would it take, like how long?
So I think we've had this discussion before, and at this point we're indicating it's approximately a year of design. So there is an EA to wrap up still. We're probably a couple months out from that work. As we put forward, the simulated capacity has been approved. We have worked through monitoring and a program with NVCA. At this point, that EA would have to wrap up. We are working with Aqua on a piloting study right now, but it could be wrapped up either with or without that information. It would then be a year of design, as we had indicated, and we've estimated approximately 2 years of construction for the upgrade. So I do believe at this point we owe council a report that I think has been suggested to come forward in April with the phase 1 costing and options that way. So yeah, we will be bringing that forward with some of those details, Councillor Bonanno.
The next part of my question or comments are, some of these projects, if we give you the approval to some of them, like I'm looking at Fieldgate. Fieldgate's taken more than a year just to get to the point where they're putting sewer pipes in the ground. They haven't even started constructing houses or anything at all. Hopefully by fall, we might see a building on the commercial. A lot of these projects are going to take a year to 2 years to get going anyway, even if we do allocate some of the sewage capacity to them. And some of the projects like Turnstone Phase 2, I think Turnstone Phase 2, I've been on council now for what, 20 some odd years. I've seen Phase 2 for the last 10 years and I haven't seen any movement on it. So some of these allocations that we're giving out or proposing to have allocations, some of them never move, never go ahead. So I know they're in the queue, or they're thinking they're in the queue, but you know, even if we do give them permission, it takes time for them to get to the point. So that's why I'm asking the question on the sewage treatment plant and how long it's going to get to where it gets, because some of them, you know, may take 2 to 3 years to get to the point where they're even utilizing that sewage treatment plant. So that's just my comment.
As sort of a follow-up to that, Steve, is there any sort of possibility to reserve capacity sort of on a conditional basis that, you know, that only becomes available once the new plant or the upgraded plant is complete?
Yeah, so that's really what the policy framework is guiding you on, is, you know, allocation at the time of development approval. But if you have, so you've committed an allocation to a number of developments, there's a little bit left over. The policies are, you know, basically giving you a framework for what do we do with this remaining 79 cubic meters per day that we have. But we know, you know, that Fieldgate is going to use up a chunk of that with their proposed commercial development, with if that gets approved. and they're planning to construct some of that this year. We know there's a number of other developments on the west side that are, over 350 homes in application processes right now. They're going to be seeking approvals later this year. Basically the official plan is saying you should reserve for stage 1 and 2 as your priority, because those areas have pipes already available to them and all they need to do is connect. And stage 3 is, after that in priority, because we know that that needs some extension of pipes. Stage 4 is, to be completely, direct on that, it's not even in the hierarchy right now. Like that urban expansion area, if you wanted to create a reserve for that, it would really require a wholesale amendment to the servicing policies in the OP. It doesn't really provide any, it doesn't contemplate that. So stage 4 is contemplated in the official plan and has been for many years now to be serviced with the wastewater plant upgrades. What I would say is the best strategy for servicing stage 4 is, given that development applications have only been received and it requires a county OPA and local OPA, we've got that application in. It's going to be at least a year to 18 months for approval consideration of that kind of application. That would be the point where we would normally be recommending some allocation be considered. You have that window of time to get this wastewater plant planning and design underway, subject of course to funding. Now, doing the design doesn't necessarily commit you to building it, but once you have a design prepared and committed, then we have a path, right? We have a path to provide the capacity, and that capacity doesn't have to be there, before anything happens on a development site, but it definitely has to be there before anyone's going to move into a house. So there is some, concurrent timing that could be part of this process, where you could be doing some of these upgrades if they're all designed and approved while you're entertaining development that relies on those upgrades.
Councillor Fegan, did I see your hand earlier?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only question I was wondering is the numbers that we're seeing here. Another example was in the industrial, where we had approval for what was going to be the grow operation. Is now, my understanding, is now going to be a storage facility. Now, I've got to think that the wastewater and the water usage is going to be significantly lower based on that. So my question is, the numbers that we're seeing, are those based on the grow operation, or have the changes to it being a storage facility been taken into consideration?
Not yet.
Yeah, through you, your worship. So we removed that from the allocation list when that applicant sold the property. So right now it doesn't have any, servicing earmarked for it.
Councillor Buffett.
Yeah, just to go back to Steve Weaver's comment about what he was just saying regarding getting things moving along and getting ahead as far as servicing goes. Am I understanding you correctly that you're also talking about the applicants? So for example, if somebody came before council with a complete application and we could give them conditional approval to go ahead and start putting the servicing in or getting everything ready and set up while they're waiting for the sewage treatment plant upgrades to take place. Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility. I mean, it's a little bit more significant than, say, a pumping station, but there are, instances where with Highland Village, they were putting pipes in the ground while they were building the pumping station and the force main, and getting their approvals, kind of ready in advance to do home construction. And similarly, Fieldgate has been in that process for a while. The process just takes a long time, and it's not going to be any different for Flato. As much as we try to expedite it, they've got many of the same things to overcome that Fieldgate has, which is getting an entrance off the highway, doing a study to support that, making those improvements to the highway, So, you know, you have that time between now and when those things are sorted out to get the design ready on the pump, on the wastewater treatment plant. What you really need to do is make sure that there's a good alignment between how far you're letting a development go and how far along you are with your wastewater plant. So if you completed the design, but you don't have a funding strategy or you don't have a timeline to build the wastewater plant upgrades, you definitely wouldn't want to give final approvals to development to proceed. But if it's just a matter of time and you've got a funding strategy, you could put conditions on that development saying, you know, we're going to have, some municipalities do it this way, we're going to have capacity for another 100 units next year. So we're going to let you phase so that you can build 100 units in the first year. And then, you know, the second phase is expected to be done by 2024. And then, you know, you can do another 100 units based on that additional capacity as the improvements are completed. I guess the only other thing I would suggest is that over time, as these developments are moving through the process, we'll continue to do these updates, right? And you'll see that the flows not only change with development, they change as a result of unpredictable things like, you know, COVID-19 and people staying home more. You know, those things have impacts, weather has impacts. So we're going to continue to monitor and see if we can make more capacity available.
Councilor Bernardo.
Okay, I'm still on mute. I guess this is a question for the CEO. Speaking to the upfront costs that Flato proposed for the sewage treatment plant, as a municipality under the Municipal Act, we are allowed to, for a developer to front end costs for a sewage treatment plant.
The short answer is there's certainly ways for development to participate in front ending. I think from the planning side, we would have to review that. I'd prefer that Steve Weaver address the logistics of that. I will add that what both Steve Burnett and Steve Weaver, as well as Jim, recommended is that engagement with respect to all the other development that would be influenced or impacted by any decision should be, you know, a strategic thing to consider as a next step. It was requested that could reallocation be considered, and that would be part of that review process. I know that, you know, the priorities of council have been well documented for us. I know there's been comments that some developments have been stalled, but I think we're all experiencing in small town Ontario that there is a resurgence in the attractiveness of our communities. And a lot of development that maybe wasn't proceeding in the past has indicated most recently they wish to proceed. And they know that they had those approvals and those allocations. So contemplating the impacts to those commitments in the overall scenario of what's being requested and the deficit that both Steve Burnett and Steve Weaver has summarized, I think would be allowing council to do a consultative review and meet with the other developers as well. Certainly how the waste treatment plant will be paid for, we've always assumed how that would be financed in a number of scenarios, including significant debt. But certainly if there's advance payment for some of the costs related to the developers that would be benefiting from that, that certainly would be a path we would look at, and it would be very welcomed.
Thank you.
On that point, I mean, there's thinking through this thing. I mean, there are, when we think about the presentation that we've just heard from our staff and engineers within the context of what we heard earlier from Flato, I mean, there are three things that come to mind that are knowns at this point. Number one is we have a critical shortage of what I would consider to be, you know, acceptable or appropriate housing for our seniors population. And this council, you know, through what we're hearing from our constituents, has made it a priority to address that issue, rightfully so. So that's no number one. Number two, you know, we know that we have a proposal in front of us from Flato Developments that, you know, proposes to provide at least a possible partial solution to that problem. I mean, it's not going to fix our entire seniors housing problem, but it's a possible partial solution. And then the known number three, obviously based on this report, is, you know, we're dealing with a severe premium when it comes to you know, just in pure economic terms. I mean, the supply certainly outpaces, or sorry, the demand certainly outpaces the supply. So for the next couple of years, until we're able to make the appropriate upgrades and expansions to the plant, you know, we're going to have a shortage of that. So that, in my mind, with those three knowns as the foundation, that begs the question: where do we go from here? And is there a path forward for this possible proposal, which I think, based on previous discussion and previous direction from council seems supportive of? You know, is there a way to accommodate this within the realities that we're currently facing? And I do, you know, sort of combining what the deputy mayor was suggesting in terms of a possible motion and what our CAO just said. I think one possible path forward, you know, is to engage in a special sort of sit-down working meeting where we do consult with some of the other developers who are major players at this point, and see if there is room to move or shift some of this allocation around. Is that something we could do relatively quickly, Denise?
I apologize. Through the word, yes, we possibly could have a special meeting before the end of April, looking at what works for council schedules. The alternative is to adjust the standard schedule and tag it on to an existing meeting. That just tends, we have a lot of, it's just the April meetings are quite busy right now in terms of the volume of reports on them, but certainly if council was willing to have another special meeting, we would quickly look at that with the intent to have it before April 30th, which I think is the last Thursday of that week.
Yeah, I mean, certainly my intent isn't to add more meetings to our schedule, but I think my preference would be to have a standalone meeting where we could, you know, dedicate the time that's deserved to this. But the way I would envision this, you know, the likes of Fieldgate, obviously, but let's get some of our other developers at the table and see if we can find room to create a path forward for this. You know, because we may be surprised too. You know, I think through this discussion, a few councillors have highlighted a couple of possible developments where allocation is sitting there, you know, perhaps being unused at this point. But there might be some other opportunities that we're not thinking of either, and we may find that there are some developers who are more than forthcoming and say, look, you know, I'm going to be a few years off here, and I can sort of wait until the sewage treatment plant expansion is done. But I think until we have kind of that frank and open discussion with everybody, it's hard to know. Denise, sorry, and I'm seeing.
Just to clarify too, that what we received at 4:45 p.m. on Friday, as Mr. Weaver had outlined, has just been received. It would still have to go through the process to be vetted and the consultative needs in order to present that to council as a development application, which currently is in stage 4. So just to clarify, that's when we received it. So I would assume the county received it around the same time.
Okay. Nick was asking to clarify a point that was made, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to provide a clarification as it relates to Appendix 2 of the sewage allocation report and the Flato Phase 1. At the bottom of the Appendix 2, where it summarizes the remaining capacity, it identifies that there's 75 unallocated residential units. And this would consist of, or at least my understanding of it is it would consist of a blend of unit types. And those 75 units form a part of the 572 units, which is identified on Table 3, being the total unit count of 572. So 75 units is derived from the 572 total from the residential demand table. So if the equivalent population and flow for Flatos Phase 1 units, being the 93 residential apartment units, is recalculated based on 1.57 persons per unit, it will show that additional residential units can be accounted for in the treatment plant. Based on, when you use 93 units at the average household rate of 3.38, it relates to 254 persons. If you do 93 units at 1.57, that equates to 146 persons. And that what that equates to is additional units, and which results in the form of allocation that can be put towards the treatment plant. As Steve Burnett did mention earlier, we did have a discussion about this on Friday, and it will be a matter of just updating the numbers to properly include Flatos Phase 1 at the 1.57 person per unit rate. That was a lot of person per unit rate, so hopefully that, that made sense to everybody.
Yeah, and just to be clear to council, as indicated, we have not had an opportunity to review any of the numbers provided on Friday. I do have some concern with the 1.57 because that is based on the DC, which is an average of apartments for Shelburne. And to be fair, council is well aware that the apartments have been based on a lot of infill in town, downtown, where a lot of things have been changed over to single bedroom apartments, one person per. So that is the average that was out of the DC. We will obviously leave it to Nick's team and their expertise to bring forward what makes sense with that application and with those details. And we will review that at that point in time.
Thank you.
So Steve, just going back to my earlier suggestion, I mean, if we were to look at some sort of special meeting within the month of April, would that give you guys enough time to sort of review the application that was filed Friday to get a clearer sense of exactly what the proposal is in terms of allocation?
Yeah, I think that would work for me.
Yeah, from my perspective, we're concentrating on one portion of the application, so I think that's fair.
Katarzyna?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly won't get into some of the submissions that Mr. Crack has provided. I'm not an engineer, and I certainly rely on him to walk us through this. But based on what we're hearing from him, my understanding is that there is, within the current rated capacity of the sewage treatment plant, the equivalent of the 75 residential units and a component at least of the ICI of 0.57 hectares. There's no question, I don't think any of us are saying that the plant does not require upgrades. Obviously, there are constraints, but I did want to flag, and I think, you know, we're taking an opportunity to review this and giving Mr. Burnett an opportunity to review it. The earlier Flato proposal included some ground-related units, which are no longer included in the applications that were filed. So there will be a difference in terms of the need or the allocation required. I also wanted to just remind everyone that Flato initially attempted to file these applications in December of 2018. We've been at this for some time, and I'm trying not to get overly frustrated with that process and with that delay, but we did require support from council to even get the applications in the door and to get a pre-consultation meeting. So there is some frustration there. It's a project that just seems to be really coming along very slowly. Included in the timeline, or included in, I'm sort of building off one of the questions, Mr. Mayor, that you posed with respect to a resolution. And I wondered whether in a resolution such as what we've asked for tonight, to have Flato receive or be considered for the available allocation, a timeline could be included that would hold Flato sort of to some sort of delivery of the project for the seniors residential and commercial. And also I wanted to point out that we deal with allocation oftentimes in conditions of draft plan approval. So I don't love this expression, but if people can't flush the toilets in the units that we're building, Flato won't be able to pull building permits. I think there are ways to address the concerns that we're hearing from staff. And I don't think we need to get overly creative in order to come to that resolution. I just am wary in how much time it's taken for us to get to this point, and that it's still taking so much time to move from the point that we're at, even though it seems like we've accomplished a lot in the last year. So I wanted to table that with you. I also wanted to clarify my earlier comment, and I appreciate Mr. Burnett's clarification on this. I wasn't indicating that the earlier reports pertaining to the allocation included phase 4. I was simply stating that the EA included the stage 4, sorry, I said phase 4, stage 4 areas. But in terms of the overall cost of the plant, if we're looking to sort of consider distribution of that cost, if we're including the stage 4 areas, you're obviously able to disperse the cost over a larger number of units and number of landowners. And that was really my point there. I'm just looking at the 3 things I jotted down. I think I've covered it off, and I do appreciate the opportunity to further clarify. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Thank you. One point that I'll make, and you know, in terms of the time that it's taken to get to this point, you know, that's unfortunate in a sense. But to your point, I think there has been significant progress made in the last little while. I for one, I'll be honest with you, would be really reluctant to support a firm resolution tonight that grants allocation just based on what we're hearing. Here's the issue that I have. I mean, as supportive as council is, I think, of trying to find a path forward with this, we also have to be responsible stewards of the whole planning sphere that sort of falls within our jurisdiction. And we have to make sure that we're not, to borrow a phrase, cutting off our noses to spite our faces, and make sure that we're not jeopardizing some other key developments in our community that are already very much underway. And that's why I've suggested, a special meeting that will allow us an opportunity to consult not only with staff now that they've had an opportunity to review the actual application that's in, and get a clear sense of exactly what capacity you're looking for, but also try to find some room to move within the current realities that we're facing. And if we can do that within a month, in the grand scheme of things, I get it. It's an extra month on your timetable that you're probably not looking for. But I do think from our perspective that is part of the due diligence process that we have to, work our way through. And hopefully we get to the end of that and we find a way to move forward with your project, but find a way to do that without jeopardizing the other projects that are in place within our community. So all of that is to say, I think you get a sense that there's support here, clearly, but we have to do it in a way that's not jeopardizing the rest of kind of the development picture within our community. And if it takes one extra month to get there, to make sure that all of those T's are crossed and I's are dotted, then I think that's probably a month very well spent, particularly from our perspective.
I very much do appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, your comments and the support from council. And as I said, I feel that we've accomplished a lot in the last year, but to get to today's date, it's taken well over 2 years. I mean, the 2-year mark was when the team attempted to file these applications the first time, which was December 2018. You can imagine there was a lot of work that led up to that moment. And I just do want to clarify that what we're doing today is asking for that resolution regarding the allocation. We're not approving the development. So you're not prohibiting other developments from moving forward by granting such a resolution. But I really do appreciate comments, sir.
All right, any Deputy Mayor Anderson?
Yeah, listen, so I'm not sure how this is all going to play out. I understand the whole due diligence part, but that shouldn't be an excuse to put things into perpetuity either. Words have to be matched with actions. And, you know, we talk about our seniors as if there's some sort of abstract piece that are out there. As elected officials, we went door to door hearing from our seniors from day one, saying that this is a priority, this is important to them. The new subdivision that is being proposed, Fieldgate, released the prices of their homes, and there are 40-foot lots that are going for $1.1 million and townhouses approximately in the $700,000 range. I don't know too many seniors here that if they want to stay in this community are going to have the opportunity to sell their homes and stay here. And you know where they're going? Interesting enough, they're going to Dundalk, where a senior's home is being built in Dundalk. And so I just like to see more action, and certainly in a timely fashion. And so, yes, I agree. If it's an additional month, so be it. Part of the motion, as I mentioned before, that I wanted to bring forward was to find out what reallocation opportunities, or as you now articulated, have a more comprehensive discussion. But as long as it's being done in a timely fashion, and if it's the end of the month or next month, then so be it. But what I want to see is what are those opportunities, and let us decide what we're going to do with them. We understand that there may be implications and some feathers may get ruffled. So be it. I'll deal with that as an elected official. If people are upset at me because of that, they could decide not to vote me in the next election. But I'm prepared to take that on. So I just want to know what they are. And I'm hoping we're going to find out, based on what you've said and what I've heard from both Steves, that this is going to be presented to us by the end of April, just shy before the end of April, so that we can now make a decision as to what we're going to do with the opportunities that exist.
I agree with you. And again, that's one of the reasons why I think that the path that I'm suggesting is probably the best one, because that will allow us to have a clearer sense of what those, you know, potential consequences are, so that we can make an informed decision. I just, quite frankly, tonight, based on all of the information we have, I mean, I'm not comfortable making a decision saying, okay, you know, let's earmark, you know, this capacity for this development, not knowing what consequences that may or may spin off from that. So if we can have all of those answered at that special meeting, provide the clarity that we need to make an informed decision, then by all means, let's do it. Councilor Bernardo.
At the end of the day, Your Worship, I'm kind of going to follow up a little bit on our deputy mayor's comments. I want to see, like, in all honesty, 15 years now, I've been pushing for seniors residents. I've been hearing for seniors residents. I've been looking for accessible housing. And of all the developers that have come into the community, none, I've been told by some that they might do it, but none have ever built it. They built homes for young couples. They build homes for whatever, but they don't build homes or anything for seniors. And I agree with the deputy mayor. The demand for seniors in this community is high, and both of us have heard it going door to door. So at the end of the day, I'm fine waiting another month if we have to wait another month to get the answers, but I want to see at the end of the month something for seniors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's disputing the fact that there's demand. I mean, that was the number one known that I mentioned in my earlier spiel. But I think the other thing that we know as elected officials, having campaigned just 2.5 years ago, that there's also huge demand in the community for commercial and retail development as well. And we do have one of those developments underway. And one of, I mean, I'll be honest, one of the major concerns that I want to address is that, you know, any path forward is not going to jeopardize a development that's already sort of, you know, underway. So if we can accomplish both and move forward, absolutely, let's do it. But let's make sure that we can do that. All right, anything else? If not, I scribbled down a proposed motion that I'll put out there and ask for a seconder. Be it resolved, the council receives report DO 2021-02 regarding sewage capacity allocation dated March 22nd, 2001 for information. And the council directs that a special meeting be called prior to the end of April 2021 to further discuss the findings and implications noted within the report with the development community that currently have active applications and who own developable property within the town of Shelburne. So the gist of it is, let's have a special meeting prior to the end of April, and let's consult with some of the other key development players and see if we can find a path forward to find the allocation that's needed. Is that the second, Councilor Bernardo?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Sorry, Denise,
I just wanted to clarify, because of the questions and requests of council, that in coordination of the special meeting, we will specifically ask a number of questions in preparation for the meeting, including whether or not any of the developments that have approvals would be able to release any anticipated allocation we'd be using in the next 1 to 3 years.
I think that's key, and I mean, I'm hoping that, you know, we can count on the good faith of our development community, and I mean, quite honestly, if they are not shovel ready and they can't, you know, proceed with the projects as originally contemplated, then, you know, I would hope and ask that they'll be forthright about that, so that we can, you know, properly allocate the limited resources that we do have right now until the sewage treatment plant is expanded. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. Okay. All right. So next is report from Steve Weaver regarding the update on the Flato proposal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to quickly give you some background. So there were some comments made by Ms. Sliwa just about, you know, how long it's taken to get to this point. Just, you know, it's all well documented, but just to quickly cover it. So in December 2018, when an application was filed, it was for, you know, between 460 and 550 units in a very large subdivision. At the time, you know, there was no pre-consultation with the town before that application being handed in. It was just submitted without pre-consultation with the town or the county. And at the time, the growth plan didn't even provide for private applications for urban boundary expansion. So it was a really unusual approach, not one that we recommended, and certainly not one that I've seen in my career where somebody's got a major development like that, didn't actually, you know, pre-consult with staff, you know, before making the application. So, you know, we did deem it premature. At the time, the town did not have an approved assimilative capacity study. There was question about whether there would be environmental capacity to actually upgrade the plant the way that we are planning now. So we had been given that advice to people outside the urban boundary for decades, frankly, and you know, just advising them strategically. It's not just a matter of when, it's a matter of if we can service those lands environmentally. I think we've now gotten past the if question, which is great, but we're still working on the how in terms of the cost of that wastewater plant upgrade. And there's more to it than that. There's the transportation side in getting access from the highway. There's getting the wastewater from that side of town to the wastewater plant. So none of that is easy. You know, there is a really long and extensive comprehensive documentation of all the consultation that happened with Flato, the advice that staff have given. And by no means are we purposefully trying to defer or delay. We totally understand and appreciate the need for seniors housing. I've been well aware of that for a long time and encouraging, you know, the development community to provide something to deal with that. I think in bringing, you know, developers back to the table to council, I think we asked them the question, are you going to propose something in your plans that would accommodate seniors housing? So that this can help to inform council in its decision making. Because, you know, frankly, we don't have a tool under the zoning bylaw where we can mandate, you know, that it be built as seniors housing. We can't necessarily mandate that somebody build that kind of housing. So you can use your servicing allocation as a bit of leverage to try and encourage that. So we'll certainly try to work with the development community to encourage that. I do think that the best approach to getting something affordable in terms of senior housing is somewhere where it can be readily serviced and at a reduced cost, and maybe even with incentives from the town. Flato's team has been quite forthcoming that there's going to be a huge cost to servicing the land, and I don't dispute that. It's going to be very difficult to service that far west, and to urbanize the road, to provide the wastewater capacity, the water supply, and so forth. So it's challenging. It's challenging in other parts of town as well to provide affordable seniors housing, and it's going to rely on incentives from the town. So I mean, that's pretty black and white. You're going to need to provide some DC relief or waiver, and you need those DCs to provide wastewater plant upgrades. So it's a really tough way to make, to make it work through incentives. But all of that is something that we're happy to work with the development community and council on to bring forward a strategy that can work to deliver on providing affordable seniors housing. And I just provided this report as the first quarterly update on the progress that has been made with Flato since the council resolution last fall. So you're aware that Flato does own 38 hectares of land over on the west side. The pre-application consultation that happened in November was around the phase 1 development, which is the seniors units and commercial on the Main Street West or Highway 89 frontage. Initially, and again, this is one of the reasons for the timeline, county staff, even as of last October, were not willing to meet or pre-consult on an application for urban boundary expansion. That direction actually came from county council to county staff, and that pre-application meeting was held. So again, that's why the timing has been unfolded the way it has. It didn't really make sense for the town to take in an application that required county and ministry approval if the county wasn't on side and wanted to deal with that through the MCR. So it took quite a while to get to the point where it had been decided that yes, the county will take applications for urban boundary expansions outside the MCR. So those meetings took place, and we got some good discussion with Flato's team and with ministry staff. Both MTO and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing attended. Conservation Authority was there, and then we did have a separate meeting with county staff for their pre-application meeting requirements, and a further meeting with Flato representatives and county planning and housing staff. I will note that we had a lot of good discussion with Flato and county staff about the merits of affordable seniors housing and if whether that was achievable on the subject land. And understandably, Flato representatives, and Shakir was at the meeting, was very direct and clear that it wouldn't be possible without some incentives. And again, the largest type of incentive that the town can provide is just by waiving development charges or reducing them. So if you were to do that, bear in mind that's in the order of $800,000 to $1 million for 93 seniors apartment units. So that's $800,000 to $1 million not available for wastewater plant upgrades, or having to come from other funding sources to source those growth, to fund those growth related needs. We did do some due diligence in looking into what Dundalk did. They did agree to a staged development charge payment. It's actually a quicker staging of development charge payments than the Act requires for rental housing. The Act provides that the first payment of development charges is due when occupancy is first granted, and then each subsequent 5 years or over 5 years, there's an annual payment each year after that until the full amount is paid. So that is something that the Development Charges Act provides that the town could do with rental apartments of any type, whether it's seniors or not, is stagger the development charge payments over a longer period to reduce the upfront cost. But again, that has implications for the availability of funding for infrastructure. In December, we issued a thorough pre-submission record, again, outlining all of the requirements and policy considerations that were discussed at the pre-application meeting, as well as some of the agency requirements. There's MTO approvals required, obviously, as well as on NVCA permits and approvals required for the site. We did receive comments back from Flato's team on December 23rd, just over the Christmas break, on that pre-application record. We continued to consult with the county and MTO into January. And then more recently, we updated the pre-application meeting record and completed it, sent it back to the applicant. We have been working with the county's transportation consultant, WSP, to get a highway access management plan in terms of reference going. So I have received that. The latest version came back to me last week. We're working with MTO to advance that to a formal work plan for council to consider undertaking that study as part of a broader transportation master plan. Again, it's a municipally initiated process that MTO requires, similar to the east side, where the only way to get access onto the highway for development is to complete this highway access management plan. Again, one of the reasons why it's difficult to evaluate this application, because we don't know if the MTO is going to support the entrance that's identified. It doesn't meet their spacing requirements. So in order to justify that entrance, MTO requires this highway access management plan, or HAMP, study to be completed. And it has to be a municipally initiated study with MTO on the kind of steering committee, similar to what was done for the east side. There's also been a lot of back and forth between SBA, town staff, and Flato's engineering team in terms of servicing information. Different options have been looked at, sending servicing into the south distribution area through the Highland Village pumping station and what would be required for that, as well as looking at routing it north through the Fiddler's Glen pumping station over to the treatment plant and some of the implications for that. And then finally, we're providing this report as a status update for council. The application's now been received as of last Friday, and we anticipate that the next steps will involve coming back to council, hopefully in short order, with a finalized work plan for the highway access management plan to again determine that access location and where it can be permitted. To review those Flato applications received on Friday to determine if they're complete. And we will bring a report recommending whether we believe they're complete or not for council consideration. And we expect to do that in the next quarter, so by June of 2021. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on the status update.
Are there any questions for Steve? Councillor Wagner, did I see your hand up early on? Don't be obligated. I thought I did, but I wasn't 100% sure. It may have been answered throughout.
I guess for me, it's I guess this is why we're going to sort of have another special meeting, because we're still not 100% sure with the numbers that they require. Correct? Like for the allocation, like with them submitting the application on Friday, will that have the final numbers that they need? I mean, we were just recently told tonight that there's no ground units now or something like that. So the numbers have now changed yet again.
Yeah, through your worship, we did receive some updated information last Friday. So previously, before the report was finalized and put in the council agenda on the wastewater capacity update, we had to make some assumptions working with Flato's engineers about how much capacity they might need. Now, the ground related units that were proposed previously, that was through submissions made last January. That wasn't an application. It was just to say, here's some background information about what we'd like to propose to do on the site. So it was a larger phase one. The new phase one is only the seniors apartments plus the commercial. But there has been, as I say, some back and forth between Nick and Steve's teams to discuss how much flow those two parts of the development would generate to determine if that can be accommodated and what the servicing strategy would be for that.
Okay, because that's part of the reason I would think too that, it's taken so long, like you said, the application process in the first place was very unique and different from others. And then with numbers changing over the course of the last, little while or whatnot, that could also extend, the reason why it's taken longer to get to this point. But yeah, I guess that was my question was, do we have more of a definitive number now so that we can potentially move forward in knowing how much they need allocated and whether or not we can provide that? Because, even though we know that this is a need in our town, we still have to, we still have sort of due diligence or whatnot, or whatever to our current ratepayers and whatnot. And we need to make sure that the sewage treatment plant can continue operations for those of us who live here already and, development in the future. So, yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Steve? If not, can I get a motion to receive that report? Councillor Fegan, seconder, Councillor Wagner. All in favor? It's carried. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you soon. Okay, next item is a request to raise the Sikh flag in recognition of Sikh Heritage Month during the month of April. Motion in support of that request. Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. Any discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. Okay, and finally, a request from Streams Community Hub regarding the waiving of fees for Grace Tippling Hall. And it looks as though that would amount to $160 plus taxes. Carrie or Jennifer or Denise? Okay. Okay, so I look for a.
Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Computer has frozen.
Yeah, we can sort of hear you. Can't see you. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Denise confirmed that amount, so. Okay. So ask for a motion to receive that request and authorize the waiving of the fees. Councillor Wagner, second by Councillor Fegan. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
My apologies, I lost internet connection.
It's okay. All right, Councillor motions. Councillor Buffett, you had mentioned earlier that you had one at the ready.
Yes, with regards to the discussion about allocation and so forth, I think in addition to having the meeting that we are now planning to have that I didn't know at the time, of course, I'd still like to introduce this motion, and Councillor Anderson is seconding it. And if I could read it now, it says that we undertake a review of policies of other municipalities regarding a more effective management for servicing projects that ensure capacity allocations, once approved, follow the principle of use it or lose it regarding allocation. And that's based on the fact that I do know for a fact that other municipalities have very strict guidelines, whether they have lots of capacity or whether they have no capacity. And I think it's important that we have a look and review those policies that they do have enforced to see if that is something that we can also add to our situation to be able to handle and deal with some of the projects that are sitting in limbo.
Okay, so we'll get that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other notices? No. Okay. Communications. 18 items listed. Anything caught anybody's attention? Stirred any passions? Requires any more discussion? No? Okay. Can I get a motion then to receive those items as listed? Councillor Bernardo, second by Councillor Hall. All in favor? It's carried. All right. Okay, so closed session. Can I get a motion pursuant to section 239 sub 2 sub F for council to move into closed session to discuss information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board by Canada, a province or territory, or a crown agency of any of them? Councillor Fegan, second by Councillor Hall. All in favor?